The mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths of legendary film actor Gene Hackman, his wife, and a dog that authorities have called suspicious, including the reported condition of Hackman's and his wife's bodies and what an affidavit calls mummification in both hands and feet.
That's Gene's daughter, Leslie, the youngest of his 3 children, stopping for lunch in Los Angeles yesterday, 2 days after authorities revealed her father's cause of death.
Try to figure out the exact cause. And I think the autopsy is going to be key, and the toxicology. It's concerning that everyone in the house, including the dog, is deceased.
Hollywood, forget the red carpets and the flashing lights. We're going down into the shadows, the back alleys where the deals are made, and the careers. Well, let's just say some careers take a permanent detour. Tonight, we're talking about Arthur Maxwell. See, Arthur wasn't just another pretty face vying for a close-up. He wasn't some flavor-of-the-month heartthrob. Arthur was different. They called him an observer, a collector. But what he collected wasn't stamps or vintage cars. Arthur collected truths, and the truths he amassed about Hollywood. Friends, they're enough to curdle your champagne and make even the most hardened cynic reach for a stiff drink. Imagine this, if you will, a ledger. Not some glossy studio accounting sheet. Not a list of box office grosses or glittering award trophies. No, Arthur's ledger was far more human and far more damning. It was a record of broken souls, of dreams stomped out like cheap cigarettes, of promising careers vanished without a trace. Arthur, in his own darkly ironic way, called it his Blacklist. Names, whispered names mostly, of young directors brimming with vision, of actors radiating raw talent, of writers with stories that could set the world on fire, all extinguished, snuffed out before their time. And right there, at the very top of that chilling roster, Victor Sterling. Victor, just the name itself, still carries weight, doesn't it? Victor Sterling, the titan of the industry, the auteur, the man who, they said, sculpted cinematic masterpieces out of thin air. But Arthur, with his unervingly clear eyes, saw something else entirely. A gatekeeper, a ruthless arbiter of taste and talent. A man who, with a snap of his fingers, decided who got the golden ticket, who got ushered through the velvet ropes, and who was left shivering in the cold, unforgiving Hollywood night. Victor Sterling, friends, believed his artistic vision was not just good, it was law. And if you dared to challenge that law, if you had the audacity to disagree, to suggest a different approach, well, let's just say your name, your bright, promising name, might just find its way onto that infamous list. And once you were on Victor's list, you were essentially done. Hollywood had a funny way of forgetting you existed. Then we have Julian Thorne. Julian, that $1 million smile, that irresistible charisma that could charm the birds from the trees, that unwavering, almost unnerving devotion. Devotion to what, you ask? To the Church of Scientology, my friends. Yes, that's Scientology. Arthur, with his unsettling ability to see past the carefully crafted facade, saw Julian not as a free-thinking artist, not as a spontaneous star, but as a carefully constructed conduit. A vessel, if you will, for a different kind of control, a power far beyond the studio lots and box office numbers. Arthur believed, and he had evidence to back it up, that Julian held key access points to a complex system, a machine that thrived on fear, on loyalty purchased with whispered promises of fame and fortune, and veiled threats of career annihilation if you dared to stray from the chosen path. Julian, in Arthur's eyes, was not just a star. He was a highly polished, incredibly effective instrument. They say power corrupts, right? Classic line. But what about the kind of power they wield in Hollywood? The power not just to make movies, but to make scandals disappear, to rewrite entire narratives, to control the very stories that reach the public, to silence voices that dare to speak out of turn. That, my friends, is where the fixer comes into the picture. A phantom, some say, a whisper in the wind, a ghost story Hollywood tells itself to explain away the inexplicable. But Arthur, he knew better. He knew the real deal. He knew the whispers that circulated in hushed tones at industry parties, the late night, untraceable phone calls made from darkened limousines, the thick, unmarked envelopes of untraceable cash that changed hands in dimly lit parking garages. He knew the grim stories, the real-life nightmares of young actors, fresh off the bus, their eyes full of dreams, only to have those dreams twisted, manipulated, their ironclad contracts suddenly, inexplicably torn to shreds, their voices permanently, brutally silenced if they dared to complain. The fixer, Arthur knew, was no ghost. He was very, very real and incredibly effective at making problems vanish. And then there's Richard Baylor. Oh, Richard, the silver-tongued charmer, the producer with the Midas touch, everything he touched seemingly turning to box office gold. But Arthur, with his cynical gaze, saw a different, far less glamorous side to Richard Baylor. He saw a broker of silence, a man who built his glittering empire not on talent or vision, but on the calculated pain of others, who profited obscenely from the broken dreams and silenced voices of those he so ruthlessly controlled. Richard Baylor, Arthur documented, was a master of the deal, and silence, it turned out, was one of his most lucrative commodities. Think about it, folks. Really think about it. The casting couch. We throw that phrase around so casually, don't we? But Arthur, he saw it not as some tired metaphor, not as a wink-wink, nudge-nudge industry joke. He saw it for what it truly was, a stark, brutal reality. Contract sealed not just with ink on paper, but with something far more compromising. Careers built not on talent alone, but on calculated compromise, on the chilling willingness to turn a blind eye to the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of Hollywood's shimmering facade. And those brave souls, those few who dared to speak out against the system, to break the code of silence, they were met with swift, brutal repercussions. Veiled threats, whispered campaigns of character assassination, the chilling, bone-deep realization that in this town, in this industry, they were utterly, terrifyingly alone. Arthur, you see, he witnessed it all. The exclusive, invitation-only parties where the real deals were struck. The hushed, conspiratorial backroom meetings where careers were bartered and broken. The secrets, the dark, ugly secrets whispered in hushed, fearful tones, the kind of secrets that could make empires crumble. He saw, with his own two eyes, the casual, almost nonchalant way power was wielded in this town, the way careers, human lives, were made and broken with a mere flick of a powerful wrist, a dismissive wave of a manicured hand. Arthur Maxwell, more than just an observer, became a living, breathing archive of Hollywood's hidden truths. He saw the rot, raw and festering, beneath the shimmering, seductive facade of the Golden Age. And unlike most in Hollywood, Arthur wasn't content to just witness. He recorded it, obsessively, meticulously. Tapes, hours upon hours of clandestine recordings, capturing whispered conversations, incriminating admissions, the casual cruelty of the powerful. Documents, leaked studio memos, damning emails, contracts with clauses that would make your blood run cold. Handwritten notes, filling countless notebooks, Arthur's own meticulous observations, a trail of breadcrumbs carefully laid out, leading straight to the rotten, pulsating heart of the beast. He wasn't naive. Arthur knew they would come for him, eventually. He understood the power he was challenging. He knew they would try, desperately, to silence him, to bury his truth, even in death. But Arthur Maxwell, he also knew something they didn't. He understood that the truth, like a persistent, unstoppable virus, spreads. It finds a way. They dismissed him, of course. Paranoid, they sneered in hushed industry whispers. Bitter, they muttered, waving away his warnings like annoying flies. But Arthur wasn't interested in petty, personal vindication, in some fleeting moment of "I told you so." Arthur Maxwell, in his own quiet, determined way, was interested in something far bigger, far more consequential: justice. In relentlessly exposing the systemic rot, the deep-seated corruption that festered, unchecked, beneath the glittering, deceptive surface of Hollywood's so-called Golden Age. They finally did come for him. Under the cover of darkness, they broke into his secluded home. They ransacked his study with brutal efficiency, tearing apart decades of meticulous work in a frantic, desperate search. They took what they thought was everything: the tapes, the documents, the handwritten notes, the tangible evidence they desperately believed would bury the truth forever, silencing Arthur, even in the grave. But these powerful men, these gatekeepers of Hollywood, made one crucial, fatal miscalculation. They underestimated Arthur Maxwell. They fundamentally underestimated the quiet, simmering power of a man who resolutely, defiantly, refused to be silenced. Because Arthur, you see, was always several steps ahead. He wasn't foolish enough to rely on just one hiding place, one set of documents. He left behind a trail, a carefully constructed, deliberately scattered trail of whispers, of cryptic hints, of names that echoed in the darkest corners of Hollywood's memory. He left behind not just evidence, but a legacy of truth, a direct, unflinching challenge to the very industry he once, perhaps, loved, and a stark, chilling warning to those who dared to abuse their power, to those who believed they were untouchable. And now, friends, the world is finally belatedly watching. The victims, emboldened by Arthur's posthumous defiance, are starting to come forward, their long-suppressed stories eerily echoing Arthur Maxwell's decades-old warnings. Social media is ablaze, a wildfire of righteous indignation, with calls for justice, for accountability, for an end to the culture of silence and abuse. Protests are erupting organically, fiercely, outside the very studio gates that once seemed impenetrable fortresses of power. The shadows, won by agonizing one, are finally, irrevocably being exposed. The powerful gatekeepers, the untouchable titans, they genuinely thought they could keep it all hidden forever. They truly believed they could meticulously control the narrative, spin the story, silence the dissenting voices. But Arthur Maxwell, even in death, is proving them spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. He's showing them, that the truth, like a relentless, unforgiving spotlight, ultimately shines brightest, most powerfully in the deepest darkness. This isn't just about Hollywood, folks. This is about something far bigger, far more universal. It's about raw, unchecked power. It's about insidious, systemic control. It's about the way we, as a society, often unwittingly allow those in positions of unchecked authority to abuse their power with impunity, to silence their victims with chilling efficiency, to rewrite history to suit their own self-serving narratives. Arthur Maxwell's story, his courageous, defiant stand, is a wake-up call for all of us. A stark, unsettling reminder that even in the most glamorous, most dazzling of worlds, unimaginable darkness can fester, unnoticed, unaddressed, just beneath the shimmering, seductive surface. And it's up to us, all of us, to collectively shine a light on that encroaching darkness, to demand real, lasting accountability, to refuse, resolutely, to be silenced any longer. They say the truth will set you free, right? It's a comforting thought. But the truth, as Arthur Maxwell knew intimately, can also be brutally, terrifyingly dangerous. It can shatter carefully constructed illusions. It can relentlessly expose the deep-seated rot at the core of powerful institutions. It can even, in the end, tear down seemingly impenetrable empires. But it remains, always undeniably, the only way to build a truly better world. A world where power is finally, meaningfully held accountable, where justice, however belatedly, ultimately prevails, and where the long-silenced voices of the victims are finally, powerfully, heard. Arthur Maxwell understood this. He knew, intimately, the immense risks he was taking. He knew the devastating personal price he would inevitably pay for daring to challenge the giants of Hollywood. But he also knew, with unwavering certainty, that the truth, however dangerous, however painful, was ultimately, unequivocally, worth fighting for, even to the bitter, lonely end. And now, my friends, the fight is ours. The fight to expose the shadows that still cling to Hollywood. The fight to hold the gatekeepers accountable for their decades of abuse and silence. The fight to reclaim the narrative, to rewrite the story, to finally build a Hollywood, and by extension, a world where the unvarnished truth shines bright and justice, at long last, truly prevails. Because in the end, folks, Arthur Maxwell proved one undeniable thing. The truth in its own time, in its own way, always finds a way to be heard. And Arthur Maxwell, in his own quiet, fiercely powerful way, made absolutely certain of that.